What's up everybody, and welcome to the first episode of A Day in Charleston Behind the Scenes. This is a short series of tutorials and educational videos where I'll be talking about how I create some of the most interesting time lapses and hyperlapses from my most recent Timelapse Hyperlapse film, A Day in Charleston. I'll be sharing with you guys the photo settings I use, the gear, the techniques, how I shoot hyperlapses, how to shoot hyperlapses at nighttime, and a bunch of other small tips and tricks that I learned over the year it took me to make A Day in Charleston. So without further ado, let's get into the first tutorial. This one's going to be talking about how to get unwanted motion, such as cars and people, out of a time lapse. It's basically making a cinematograph out of a time lapse. So here's the time lapse before I got all the commotion out of it. And you'll see down at the bottom, there are cars going by, people walking their dogs, doing their morning routines. It's a sunrise on Rainbow Row, so I'll let you check that out right now. Very quickly, I'll talk about the gear and the photo settings used to shoot that time lapse. I shot it on a Panasonic GH5 with a 12-35 f2.8 lens on it. I shot it in aperture priority mode. The sun is rising, so the exposure is changing a lot. Aperture priority mode is my favorite for those type of situations. I think I had it at f9, and I just had it on a Manfrotto tripod, locked down, not moving anywhere. The whole sequence probably took, I think, about 2 hours and was something like 2,000 photos that I edited to do it. So now I'll show you the finished time lapse with all the commotion, all the cars, the people edited out of the time lapse, and then we'll get into the post-processing and I'll explain how you can do it. It's a huge difference for me. The time lapse is so much more surreal without all those cars and people moving all through the bottom of it. Well worth the time of doing all the editing to get that out that I'll show you in a second. Another quick note before I do that, I'm not going to get into how I edited the photos on the specific time lapse. I'll get into that one later. I used LR Timelapse and Lightroom together to edit them. There are also tons of other tutorials on YouTube about how to do that you can check out. I'll probably link one down below. But for right now, I'll get into the post-processing of how to take out all that motion. So this is the project file I used to create the effect of there being no motion, commotion, people, cars in the time lapse. And what you can see is a bunch of layers stacked on top of the original time lapse here down at the bottom. Now, if we're scrolling through that original time lapse, you see all the commotion and things that are going on, making it imperfect. And what I've done is taken freeze frames from the start, the middle, later, a little later, and the end, and overlaid them on top of it. Now I found parts where there's no movement in the bottom, so if we turn on this first layer, you'll see that I grabbed it from a spot right there where there's no cars or people walking in the frame, and I've taken a draw mask and masked out just the bottom portion of it so that only the bottom portion isn't moving, the top portion's still moving. If we turn that draw mask off, now there's no motion at all. The whole frame is just a freeze frame. So with the mask on, now the top still has movement and you can see the sun starting to come down. And what we've done is just repeated that process a number of times so that the exposure in the bottom matches how the top looks like as well. The exposure is changing not just in the top portion of the frame, but in the bottom portion. The tones, the shadows are slightly different as the sun is rising, and so I've taken freeze frames from each little part, and you can see I tried out different ones in different places and just blended them together slowly, blended the masks together so that it's totally seamless. So that was the quick version on how I edited that time lapse. If you've got questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'll be sure to reply to everyone's comments, everyone's questions. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. I am going to be doing more of these videos. And before I go today, I'm going to give you a quick sneak peek on the hyperlapse I'll be talking about in next week's tutorial. This is Matt Coda, signing off.